Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, I have already created one of the super admin user, and also we logging it, right? So right now we don't need this. So now I want to do in this video, I want to discuss about some of the example for this model. Like here, if you go our project, so in particular that positions, right now we don't need this. I just simply close it. Okay. So now in particular that positions, they have some of the parameters. So into these parameters, I have using as a maximum length as a 50, right? So here they have some of the another parameter I also want to share with you. Like by default, they have the another parameter as a null. Okay, so null means when it should be by default, that will be as a false. Okay, by default that actually the false, and if you make the things as a true, that means if you make the things as a true, then this field will be marked as a null. So by default in Django that is actually the false, but if you want to change it, if you want to make that field as a nullable, then you can make the things null as a true. Okay, and also they have the another parameter that is actually the blank, and by default this blank actually the false. Okay, so by default that is actually the false. So by default that is actually the false. That means you have to mark this field as a required. Okay, that means this field is the required. So if you want to make the things as a not required, then you can just change it, that is a blank parameter, you have to change it as a true. Okay, you have to just change it as a true. I hope you can well understand about it. So by default this blank as a false, so when it should be as a false, that means you have to insert that data. That means this field is the required. It's just like some of the input fields. So input the input, if they have some of the required, right? They have some of the required options that this field is the required. So this type of some of the parameters. But in Django here, if you want to use it, then you have to make the things as a true. So when it should be as a true, then you can make the things field as a not required. Okay, or rather than by default that was as a false. So by default that will be as a false. So when it should be as a false, then you cannot actually make that field as a empty. You have to insert some of the data in a specific this field. Okay friend, so here there is actually another parameter as a blank. So I think you can well understand about it. So that is actually by default some of the parameter that will be needed in our project. And also they have the another option for the choices. Like here, if you want to put your user to your user can choose only one option. Okay, then you can also define that things with the choices. So how can working with this in this video I will show you. Like here there is our number of stars, right? So into this number of stars field here I want to define some of the option. So here I want to use some of the choices option that user can only choices some of the rating, that is good, that is the bad, and that is the excellent. So only user can only use one option. So here if you want to add this type of one of the choices function, then how can do it? I show you. Like here, first of all you have to define I just take one of the variable as a rating. So I just simply define as a rating, and into this rating area, so into this rating area I have to define our field. First of all here it should be as a value. I show you, everything will be very much clear to you. I just simply define as a 1 will be as a value, and then our name will be, it's just like as a select options, right? In HTML I think you already know about it, that select and the option, and for the option we define some of the value, right? So now I just simply defining it as a host. So I just simply define one of the name will be as a host, and then I want to take another one as a 2 value, and for this one I just simply define as a bad. And also I want to take another one as a 3, and for this one I want to define as a not bad. Okay, not bad. So this type of one of the text, so this the text will be visible in our option area, that means our choices area. And also after that I want to take another one as a 4, and for the 4 I define as a good. So only user can choose a specific this all that field. Okay, so here I define as a 5, and for the 5 I name it as excellent. Okay, I just name it as excellent. So now if you compare it to with our HTML code, into the HTML what exactly we did. Into the HTML, better I want to put some of the comments for this one. Into the HTML we defined that select, right? So we define that select. Into the select what exactly we did. Into the select we define some of the option. So we define some of the option. So into the option here there's some of the value, and into the value we define some of the value, right? And also after that we define some of the code as a host. So this type of one of the text, that's the text actually will be visible, right? So after that we have to close it, option. So after that we have to close it. So if you now compare with this one, so that is our HTML code, into this HTML code that is actually an option value, and here in Django that is actually our value. Okay, and also that is actually our text, that is a host text. So now I want to print this text as a host. That is a bad, that is a not bad, that is good, and the excellent. It's just like that same. Okay friend, so now I think it should be very much clear to you. So here I just simply defining it. So with this setting I simply define some of the value as a 1 value, the 2 value, 3 value, and for the 3 value our text will be as a not bad. So here I am defining it, and now we have to pass that things in our this field area, that means our number stars field area, and into this numbers field area there is our models, and here I define as integer field, right friend? So here I can say I define that all that integer value. So here if you want to use some of the string value, okay, like here if you use some of the string value, then you have to update this type. That means then you have to use it as a character field type, right? So now it's okay with me. I am using that all that integer value for the reasons it's okay with me. So now we have to pass our this setting. We have to pass it. That means that it will be as a choices. And here we have to pass our this setting. So I just simply copy it, and here I just simply pass it. Okay friends, so that's all you have to do. So as I told you, whatever the things you will update it in our models area, then you have to migrate it with the 3 commands, right? So now first of all I want to click on the save all. I click on the save all, and now go to our terminal. I just open our terminal, and particular that position, first of all I have to migrate it. So I just simply define as a Python, and then as a manage.py, and that migrate. I just simply define as a manage.py, and the migrate, click as a enter. Now you can see it's now perfectly added, and after that we have to do our second command. Our second command will be as a Python, and that manage.py, and that make migration. Okay, make migrations, and our application name is the fast app, fast_app, right? So that is our fast app. So that will be as a Python manage, that means the manage.py, and that make migrations, and the app. Now click as a enter. Perfect. And now we have to do again our run this command as a Python manage and py migrate. So I just simply define as a Python, and that manage.py, and that migrate. Python manage.py, and that migrate. Click on the enter. Now it's perfect. And after that I want to run our server. So I just simply define as a Python, okay, Python, and that manage.py, and then run server. So I just simply define as a Python manage.py, and run server. Click as enter. Our server is now running. So I just simply copy it, and now go here, and now open it our server again. So now go to our admin, click at the enter. So that is our admin. So I have already logged in for the reasons I can actually access it. So now if you go to our albums, and now go to our add albums, and into the add albums, here you can see now I have defined that number of stars. So there is the field here. I have defined all the choices option. So now you can see all the choices option is now visible as a worst, as a bad, as a not bad, the good, and the excellent. So all that our value here I have defined. So all that our value I have defined for the rating. So that is our all that value. So now it's perfectly now visible. Okay friend, now you can see it's now perfectly visible in particular that position. And also it's now showing all that our artists. So if you want to add some of the albums, right now I don't have any data, right? So now if you want to add new album, like I just name it as a Kazarian, and I just name that name as a new album. Okay, I just name it as a new album, and here I just define that release date as a today, and I just make that number of stars as a excellent. Okay, so now I just simply defining it, click as a save. Yeah, you can see this album object 1 was added successfully, and here you can see also it's now successfully added on here. And here into this album area, you can see it's now showing as a album object. Because of all here I didn't define any style link, like here in our that position, you can see I defined that style line with the show with the first name and the last name for our this model, that means our musician table. Like if you go to our musician table, then it will be very much clear to you. If you go to that musician table, here you can see to the musician table I have defined our first name and the last name. So for the reasons, actually it's now showing like that way, but in our albums, into the albums, it's showing as an album object. So here if you want to display your name, that means in our album they have also one of the field. Into the field I have defined that name, and also in our number of stars I have defined as excellent, right? So if you want to display this type of things, then you can also defining it. So if you want to do that work, then you have to go to here. So right now we don't need this, and in particular that position. So here after this, here I want to add the same things. I just simply copy it. And after this, okay, after this here I want to add our this div style line, and here there is a self. Into the return with the self I want to display that name, that means our artist name. So artist name will be visible, and here I want to do after that it will be show as a rating. So it will be show as a rating, and with the self here I want to display our these choices, all that our rating data. Okay, here that is our field name as a name stars. So I just simply with the self I define as a name stars. Okay, that means a number of stars. And also here I define as the Eastern. So here we have to use it. So I just simply define as Eastern, and here we have to finish it. In particular that position we have to defining it. Okay, so I define the stern, and here the self our number star. So I just simply perfectly defining it on here. So now it should be updated. So friend, here I have updated our models. As I told you, whenever you update your model, then you have to run 3 of these commands. So now we have to run it again. Click as a save all. Okay, just click as a save all. So right now we don't need this, I cancel it. I want to run it again. So I just save all, and now first of all we have to run again as a Python manage.py and migrate, right? And now click as the enter. It's perfect. And after that Python manage.py, and then our make migrations, and our application name as a fast underscore app. So I just simply define as a Python manage.py and the make migration and fast app. Click on the enter, and after that also we have to run it again as a Python and that manage.py and that migrate. So now I just click on the enter. Yeah, everything is now updated. So now I want to run our server. So I just simply define as a Python manage.py and then run server. I just simply run our server. Click as enter. Yeah, our server is now perfectly running. So now if you go here, go to the home, refresh it, go to the album. Yes, now you can see friend, now it's actually showing that name. So for this album I have defined that name as a new album, and after that I have defined that comma, right? So now it should be very much clear to you. Here I have defined that name, that means our album name, and then the comma, and after that it should be display the rating, one of the text. So you can see after that comma, that is actually showing the ratings, and ratings our value actually visible. So here it's now visible as a value as a 5. So I have defined that as a excellent for this one, and for the excellent value is a 5. So right now you can see I defined that our stars, so there is a number is stars field. So now it's perfectly visible our rating 5 value. So if you want to change it, if you want to if you want to display that name, you can also define that name on here. So friend, I think it's very much clear to you how can do that work. Okay, so I have already discussed about that with the view, the template, and the models, right? So now together everything, how can read all the data and how can visible it in your Fondant page. That means if you go to our Fondant, into the Fondant, if you go here, so that is our Fondant, right? So here I have already discussed about that things with you, how can loaded your template, and also that have some of the static data, how can add that CSS in particular that position. So now together everything, how can actually display all that your data, that means in our database right now they have some of the data. So if you want to display all that data, so right now there is a musician, they have the two data. So if you want to read this data and visible this data in particular that position, how can do that work? In our next video I will show you that things with a live example. So thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.